Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Perry with the Circle of Atonement, here with Circle founder Robert Perry. And today we're talking about what it actually means to live a Course in Miracles. In the interest of full transparency, I should say that we've chosen this topic for our discussion today because living a Course in Miracles is our theme for 2026 in our Course Companions program. If you're not familiar with Course Companions, this is our signature program here at the Circle. It's where we journey through A Course in Miracles together in community. We started Course Companions 8 years ago. It's really hard to believe that it's been that long. And it's grown to where we now have over 1,000 friends from around the world who are all walking this path together. And even though we've been hosting Course Companions since 2017, it's only been in the last couple of years that we've had a unifying theme for the year. Old school Course Companions may remember that our first theme a few years back was Islands of Peace and Beacons of Love. And this year, our theme has been A Course in Miracles Essentials. And we spent the whole year together covering the foundational teachings of A Course in Miracles that every student needs to know. And one thing that has really stood out to me, and I know I speak for Robert when I say this as well, is that for many years in Course Companions, we hosted different classes through the week. So if you're in the text, you take this class. If you're in the workbook, you take this class. And for this year, this was the first year, 2025, where we ran a bit of an experiment where we said, if we just have one class a week, can we have a more close-knit, more rewarding experience going through this material together as a community? And it really feels like we've been able to do that. So many insights, so many transformations, so many heartwarming stories. And we're going to keep that going in 2026 with our theme of living A Course in Miracles. And our plan is to help you not just understand what the course says, building on what we've done this year in terms of understanding the course, but what it means to really walk this path every day. This is by far our most ambitious theme yet, a year of living the course, and our goal is truly to take everyone on a one-year adventure of practicing the course together. So, Robert, this was your idea, this theme for next year, and so I guess we should just start with what was the inspiration behind living the course for a year before we get into exactly how you do that.
This, of course, is, it's a major question and concern of every course student. And that certainly has been true in my own case. I've been wondering what it means to live the course consciously since the 80s and doing my best to do what I knew that meant, which has, evolved and grown over time. The sense that I have is that we all have these spiritual longings when we get on the spiritual path. We have these hopes and dreams for finding true peace. We want to have a sense of love for everyone. We want to shed our fears and anxieties. We want to feel a greater sense of closeness with God. There's so much that we hope will come out of the spiritual journey. But what happens? Life takes over. Every day is busy. There's other priorities. We are often reluctant to do all that we are told that it takes to get there. And so somewhere inside of us, I think there is this thought that lingers like, what if I really applied myself? What if I really did all that I know to do? Could I lay hold of those promises that started me on the spiritual path. Could I live in that state of peace, in that state of freedom from anxiety and fear? Could I have a greater experiential sense of God and my true identity? Could I feel truly guided in my decisions and in my life? Could I just love everyone? So I think that we're all carrying that, or we wouldn't be here. Somewhere inside, we're carrying that. And it just felt like such a great way to spend the year. Like, let's just completely focus on that.
What you're talking about in terms of those longings that we have as we embark on a spiritual path are such reminders of the kind of longings that we have at the beginning of every new year. And we get all excited about these goals that we're going to achieve. And then we typically fall off the wagon, February, March, that kind of thing. And the difference from my experience in achieving a resolution and not is having a plan. What is actually your plan for achieving the goals that you've set for yourself? And it's no different in our spiritual life than it is in every other aspect of life. What is your plan? If you want to achieve the goals that the course sets out for you, and they are many, then what exactly are you going to do? If you want something different to happen, what are you going to do differently? And so that's really what's exciting me about next year is, okay, we're going to come together and have a structure for making the course practical. And let's just get into what that looks like. Whether someone is part of Course Companions or not part of Course Companions, what is the structure that you recommend to make the course practical?
Before getting into that, I think I want to dwell for a while on the question because, I've been with the course since the early 80s. And I've just heard that question like a drumbeat forever. I remember after we had the circle's kind of grand opening in 93, we invited people who had attended that weekend over to the house to talk about, the future of the circle, went around the room, and practically everyone in the room said, well, I understand the teachings, but I want to know how to live it. I want to know how to make it practical, to the point where by the time everyone had finished sharing, there was a guy there and he was like, it sounds like, you've got your mandate. Focus on how do you live this? And so I've just heard that again and again and again for years. And it was my own question. When I was in the first 10 years of being a course student, I was like, okay, so what do I do exactly? So course students are always wondering, how do we apply this? Like, I get the teachings, but what do I do to experience them, to live them? And I think this is a source of a lot of confusion among course students. I think as a result of that insistent question, we will often latch on to some really simple formula. Well, it all comes down to, I turn things over to the Holy Spirit. It all comes down to, I forgive myself. It all comes down to, I look at my ego without judgment. We find one practice, and maybe we can't even point to that practice in the course, but somebody who's a teacher figure, usually who's in a position of authority, tells us that's it. And we go, okay, thank God. Now we know what to do at last. I'll just do that. I remember there was a course conference I went to, and a teacher and writer was there who was saying, well, we know we're supposed to forgive, but the course never tells us how to forgive. So here are some things I put together myself on how to do that. There's just a widespread attitude where we're all feeling to some degree, out to sea with this question.
It's always interesting because the course itself is absolutely full of practical instruction. It's got a whole workbook that tells us exactly what to do each day. And you and I were also struck, we're going to so struck by this, in fact, that our next podcast is going to be dedicated just to this topic. But before the course even started coming through, Jesus was giving scribe Helen Schuckman practical instruction. So the day before the course came through officially, he's giving Helen advice on how Bill can hear guidance more clearly. And then as the first dictation comes through the course with the miracle principles, right embedded in that, he's saying, reread these again. And that's so reflective of what we're going to see later in the workbook, where he wants us to reread the ideas all the time. So right from the very beginning, he is giving practical instruction. And yet even Helen was like, I don't know what you're asking me to do. I don't want to do this. And actually, I think I don't know what you're asking me to do is code for I don't want to do this. And Jesus understands that. In fact, there's a quote that I wanted to read from chapter 11 in the CE, where this just explains all of our attitude towards the course when we say it doesn't tell us what to do. Jesus says, quote, you may complain that this course is not sufficiently specific for you to understand it and use it, yet it has been very specific, and you have not done what it specifically advocates. This is not a course in the play of ideas, but in their practical application. So it's not like we don't know that the course is full of practical instruction. It's that we don't do what it specifically asks. Again, I'm not saying that from the top of the mountain. We all do this, right? And so what do you have to say about that idea, that it's not that the course isn't practical, it's just that we're not doing what it asks us to do?
Well, I think that passage captures it perfectly. And more over time, I've gotten focused on that passage because it mirrors, he's talking to Helen and Bill there, but what he was addressing in them mirrors what has happened with course students ever since. And it kind of goes like this: the course does tell us what to do. We don't do it for one reason or another. Okay. And then after we don't do it, we complain that it's not practical. And we even, I think, what I would say is we're not aware that there are the practical instructions by and large. I think what happens is we so brush over them with some kind of quick mental gesture that says either, well, this isn't the real stuff. I know that's there, but it's not going to do much. This isn't the real stuff. Or we brush it over. The thought that is in this passage that actually is mentioned in the paragraph that follows is we're kind, in terms of asking the Holy Spirit, we're afraid of his answer, that it's not going to be what we want to hear. So either way, whether we're thinking this isn't the real stuff or whether we're thinking this is slightly frightening, we brush over it so quickly that we actually aren't aware of how much practical instruction is there. So then in that lack of awareness, we're like, hey, this isn't practical. What's with it's all just ideas. Where's the practical? And it's simply because we haven't taken the instructions seriously. We haven't done them. And having not done them, we haven't experienced their benefit.
I always think Helen and Bill themselves are really instructive here, because Jesus is saying to Helen again from the very beginning, do this, and she's not really doing it. And I love his patience with her in some of that material that came through before the course proper started coming through, where he says to her, look, I'm not mad. I just don't want you to suffer so much. And that's his attitude with all of us, when we fall off the wagon in terms of the practice of the course. He's not angry. He just doesn't want us to suffer so much. But Helen couldn't quite get on the ball with the practice, and so therefore in her life she didn't experience the rewards. Bill, on the other hand, did. those who knew Bill were always talking about how he was very committed to the practice of the course, and the his life demonstrated that. And so in Helen and Bill, you have these two examples of what happens when you do what the course asks you to do and when you don't. And so I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, or if you want to say anything more about the practical instructions that Jesus was giving literally from day one of the course coming through.
Well, I think both of those topics are really interesting because it's true. Helen didn't derive a lot of benefit from the course. She was more serious early on about doing what Jesus said. But as time went on, you get the impression that that seriousness, that early push drained away. And Bill, on the other hand, became increasingly serious and experienced increasing benefits. So that really says something. But the other thing you brought up, I think, is also important. You see him from the get go giving all of the instructions for practical application for what you do on this path early on to Helen and Bill personally. They show up in the course proper, but they also show up in personal guidance. Virtually everything that he asks them to do or ask us to do is right there at the start, while the very first like 3 chapters are coming through. So interesting. But then those practical emphases, they continue throughout. The workbook is totally devoted to them, but you see them sprinkled throughout the text and the manual. And in both the text and the manual, you also have sections that are devoted to what do you do with your day. And and that really, those are like the ground zeros, you could say, of the practical instructions, because those instructions always amount to a way to have a different kind of day. And what you do, starting when you get up, ending when you go to sleep, to have that different kind of day. And the course goes into enormous detail about that. But that detail, as you're saying, it started as soon as Helen was taking dictation.
So we've been focused on this a lot in the circle. What is it that you do in the day as a course student? And we've got a whole walking the path diagram, which we'll be, hearing a lot about in Course Companions next year. But Robert, can you just walk us through a day in the life of a course student? Like, what is the specific practice that he wants us to do throughout the day?
I'll give the fairly brief but also full on version. I think any amount of this we do is going to be a benefit. But if we really take him fully at his word and we're on our game, it goes something like this. So when we first wake up, we have words of truth in our lips, so to speak. We have a prayer in our mind, and then as soon as possible, when we are ready, when we can be in a quiet place without distractions, we sit down. We spend some time reading the course. The act of reading can itself be truly transformative. And the course talks about how we can read it in a way where it's not kind of an empty, dry experience that puts you to sleep, but is a transformative experience. Then, after that act of reading, we have what the course calls our morning quiet time. We spend time with God in various forms. I mean, if you're doing the workbook, you get different ways to do that every day. But the main thing we do in that time is meditation. Unbeknownst to, I think, the majority of course students, the course specifically in great detail teaches highly effective methods of meditation. Ideally, before we get up from that quiet time, we ask for guidance about our day. And we have basically a goal for the day in which we're focusing on a certain line that we practice throughout the day, and that line becomes essentially our goal for the day, the realization of that line. We then go into the activity of the day. We pause for practice on the hour, ideally for a couple of minutes, in which we can do many different things. But that hourly practice is a way to renew that state of peace we achieved in our morning meditation. And it's also a way to treat each hour as its own kind of unit, kind of like you treat the day. So you put the previous hour to bed, you ask for guidance for the hour to come. And then within the hour, you're practicing, as I mentioned, a line. You're practicing like an idea for the day from the workbook, although the text has many such ideas in it, where you have focused repetitions that can take a matter of seconds or they can take a minute. And you're doing that frequently throughout the hour. The workbook's average is about 4 or 5 times during the hour. But then that's where the formal, you could say schedulable, if that's a word, practices stop. And now it becomes more spontaneous because what also is happening as you go through your day is you're having upsets. Things are getting to you, things are causing you worry or fear or anger. And the idea is that you immediately respond with a practice that has the power to dispel that upset. The Course calls this response to temptation. It's a major feature of the Course, going all the way back to the early text and all throughout the workbook. It's also mentioned in the manual. And then on top of all that, you're asking for guidance about your decisions. You're especially asking for guidance about your interactions because the notion is you're meant to be a miracle worker in the world. You're meant to be responding to the needs of the people that you come in contact with. And your response is meant to be an expression of love, expressions of love, which is what the Course says miracles are. But you don't know on your own what they need. And so you're asking for guidance. What do I say? What do I do? And then as a result of that, you are giving those expressions of love. You're giving miracles. You're being, which the Course calls the maximal service that you can do on this earth. So you're being of service through love to the people that you encounter. And so you have a style of practice that begins, that's kind of grounded in your time in the morning and extends into shorter and a little bit longer formal practices throughout the day. And that sets you up to be spontaneously responding to the events of your day, whether they are upsets internally or whether they are opportunities to give externally. And that's meant to continue throughout the day. And then, of course, the Course talks about having a quiet time in the evening in which you close your day. Sometimes he talks about giving thanks for the day or receiving thanks from God. And then in that time, you also set yourself up for a different kind of sleep in which you're sleeping free of fear, peacefully, and readying yourself for the next day. Now, all of that sounds like we can't do that. But then any discipline in life sounds that way until you build it up piece by piece by piece. And so the Course really makes sure that all of this is doable. It all can flex according to the demands of your day. This has all been completely designed to be achievable even in the midst of a busy life.
That's what I was going to say is that once you've been doing this for a while, it becomes more reflective. Like um, when you wake up in the morning, you're not thinking, do I want to do this reading? Do I want to do my lesson? You just wake up and you know that's what you're doing, right? You don't even have to think about it. And you always like to say that if you do the practice, you have a different kind of day. And if you have enough different kinds of days, you have a different life. And so, for anyone who's thinking, well, gosh, that sounds like a lot. Well, what's a lot is living in pain. What's a lot is allowing your ego to take over your mind to such a degree that the only thing that you can see is through the lens of the ego. What the Course allows you to do with every single practice period that you have throughout the day. And it is true that the Course, if you're practicing on the hour, if you're stopping on the hour and you're repeating your lesson and you're actually thinking about what it means, it's time consuming. It takes a minute. And yet if you do it enough, you start to build that spiritual muscle such that when you're triggered, your response to that trigger is far more loving than it would have been otherwise without all the practice that you did. And so, for anyone, again, who's thinking that the course really asks a lot, that's a lot of discipline. Yes, and yes, and it flexes. So, it's not like you're asked to be perfect every day. And consider what's harder, doing the work that you're asked to do or living in the pain and suffering of what it is to be in this world without the work. And you were saying earlier that to me earlier that the bulk of your 45 years with the course has been primarily studying the workbook and trying to figure out what it says and what it's asking us to do. And so in the walking the path diagram that you've just verbally outlined, this isn't just like your theory about what the course is saying. This isn't just, Robert's greatest hits about what we're supposed to do. This is coming from what the course itself is asking us to do. And I know it is kind of funny to me that you're perennially referred to as the theory guy, because I know, because I live with you, how much of a focus you have on doing the practice and doing the practice, trying to figure out the best way to teach it, to live it, has been the focus here at the circle since 1993. And so again, this is all tested, and this is all coming from a place where so much work has been put into to trying to pass on how to do this practice every single day.
It's true. I mean, that brings up a lot for me. One thing is I think it wouldn't sound like so much if everyone involved with the course was saying it. Just imagine everyone talking about this. So it's kind of understood. And then once it's understood, we talk about how we can support each other in it. But because, in my experience, we're alone in saying this, and maybe there are others, I just haven't heard them. Because we're largely alone, it sounds strange. But the fact is that you can just it's not hard to see these patterns if you're looking for them. It just almost take any one of the workbook lessons in part one of the workbook, especially earlier in part one, and you'll see this recurrent structure where he talks about what you do in your morning time. He talks about what you do with your frequent practice. He talks about what you do with your response to temptation. He talks about what you do with your evening practice. The patterns that we're talking about here are so visible. It's just that we've kind of collectively decided to ignore them. And that's like endlessly strange and curious in my mind. So my focus has been, as you said, for as long as I've been with the course, especially after my first few years, my focus has been, okay, what do I do? Because I'm a student first and a teacher second. What do I do? And then finding, oh, he keeps saying the same kind of thing again and again and again. And when I actually do it, I get the results. And that's been my experience continually. So, for instance, with meditation, for me, my biggest breakthroughs with meditation have been deciding I'm going to really, really pay attention to the instructions and do exactly what he says. And then lo and behold, it suddenly works a lot better. So that cycle of researching it in the course, finding out what he says, understanding what he says, and then doing it and getting the results has just been a kind of an ever ascending spiral. And another part of it has been, like you said, we've been teaching these things um, for a lot of years. I think we've really thrown a lot of effort in this direction in recent years, and then finding, okay, well, what works best for people in terms of how to teach this? As we've been developing these topics at the circle, it's kind of virgin territory. I still don't know why everyone's not talking about these things. If you look at conversation within the course community, there are certain topics that are kind of bandied about, all the time, and they change over time. Nowadays, one of the ones I see talked about so much is the course dual or non-dual, which is an important conversation. We've done podcasts on that. But while we're talking about that, why aren't we collectively talking about how to meditate, or if meditation is in the course? Why aren't we talking about how to repeat the idea for the day and how often to do that? Why aren't we talking about how he tells us to ask for guidance and to listen for guidance? Why aren't we talking about this whole issue about miracles? Why aren't we talking about what to do with our hourly practice? I still don't get it, because these are recurring topics throughout the course. He's like constantly telling us to do these things, repeat this thing, for instance. Why aren't we all focused on that? And yet, instead of being focused on that, we're like, well, I wish you told us what to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it just puzzles me no end.
Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, I get that we can't really drill into any of the specific techniques today. We can just tell you what they are and get into them over the course of the next year. But I am amazed actually at the way in which, when you focus on these things, so just taking part of what you said about how a course student spends their day, if you have a focus on guarding your mind against egoic thoughts, against all the thoughts that would cause you to judge and condemn, asking for guidance, clearing out the ego, asking for the Holy Spirit's guidance to direct your actions. And then from that place, your actions become more loving. And when your actions are more loving and it's coming from more of a healed mind, then your life just goes better. And so that is, I think, one thing that we can say about how to, do the practical application of the course that fits within this podcast, is that, if you are focused on guarding your mind and asking for guidance and giving expressions of love, you are living the course. The problem is that our minds are too trained in our ego. And so we have to unlearn, as the course says, that egoic way of thinking, that wrong-minded way of thinking, so that we can relearn what the course is asking us to do. And all of that relearning comes from the practice that it's asking of us. And so you are not going to live this path. You are not going to respond in a loving way when you're being triggered if you're not thinking about this all throughout the day. What's going to happen if you pick up your workbook and you read it for your morning inspiration, and then you forget about it until the next day when you pick up the workbook again, and then you're triggered all throughout the day, and you're responding to those triggers in a reactive, angry way, and then you wonder why the course doesn't work. Well, that's not fair, because you're not doing what it's asking of you, and wondering why it's not working. And so that's really, I think, the heart of what we want to do over the course of next year, is really embed this idea of living the course, so that it becomes more of a just a reflex that you don't have to think much about.
One thing I really want to get across, now and in our year to come, is that there is, as we've been saying, a whole system of practical application, and it is a system. We think of the course as a thought system, this like almost like an original, brilliant, multifaceted diamond of a thought system. We also need to think of the course in that way in terms of its practice. There is a system of practical application that is also original, brilliant, multifaceted, like a diamond. And yet, that first diamond, the teaching, is gotten all of our attention. And that second diamond, so far as I can see, has been basically collectively ignored. And yet, that second diamond is the key to laying hold of the Course's promises. We are all stunned by the Course's promises. He talks about being in a state of peace all the time, right? Among many other promises. But the Course also makes it clear we're not going to lay hold of those promises without doing what it says. So, one of my favorite examples of this is the opening lines of the workbook that affirm both the text and the workbook, but in different ways. So the workbook opens by saying a theoretical foundation, such as the text, is necessary as a background to make the exercises in this workbook meaningful. Then he says, yet it is the exercises that will make the goal of the course possible. So if we want all those things that we've been hoping for on this journey with the course, we've got to actually do what it says.
I remember at the beginning of our forgiveness challenge where we spent a month focused every day on the course's practices for forgiving someone. We said that forgiveness is like a muscle in the sense of if you work at this every day, you can get somewhere. Just as if you have something heavy that you want to lift physically, if you do the physical exercises, you're more capable of lifting heavy things. Well, the course is the spiritual version of that. If you do the spiritual exercises, you're more capable of doing the heavy emotional lifts again, so that when you're triggered, when something happens to you, when you feel that betrayal, when you feel that anger, when life throws you the curveball that you never wanted and you never expected, how do you respond to that? Well, the response comes from your spiritual practice. One of the things that I always say is that there's that line, fix the roof when the sun is shining. You know, you have to do the practice so that when life throws you that curveball, you know what to do. When you get the curveball, when you get the diagnosis, when you suffer the loss and the grief, that's not the time to say, oh, I guess I should find a spiritual practice. And unfortunately, that is often the time when people go in search of spiritual living. You're the only person I've ever met in my entire life who got on the spiritual path because you were in search of truth. Most people, including myself, found spirituality when you just hit the bathroom floor and you need a better way. And so that's the benefit of taking the time to focus on what it actually means to develop those spiritual muscles so that they're very strong when you need them to be strong. That comes with work. It's always amazing to me that in every area of life, we understand that if you want to get something out of it, you have to put the work into it. Except in spirituality, it's bizarre. We think that in spirituality, you just sit back and allow, and that the gifts will just come to you. But the course just has a completely opposite approach. The course is asking you to do a lot of work. I think that that's part of what's intimidating about this path for so many people is it's asking a lot of you, but you get so much in return. You know, the course's promises of, do you want to be more loving? Do you want to forgive? Do you want to be more guided? Do you want more harmonious relationships? Do you want a life of purpose? All of these things the course is promising us, and all of these things I know you don't like to talk about your life, but I'll be happy to share. I feel like the course has delivered on every single promise that it's ever made, from doing the work. And so it holds out these promises, but it actually delivers them if you do your part.
Well, we've done this enough. We've done this enough in our own lives. We've done this enough in terms of teaching people that I think we can safely say that if people come along with us on this journey, it will be a life-changing year. All the methods we'll be teaching in the coming year are straight out of the course, and they work. They they reliably get results.
Before we get into the year, I want to talk about the the meaningful times that we've had in the community over the past many years, but in the past couple of years especially. I think it has really done wonders to the work that we do here at the Circle in Course Companions, to have everyone going through an experience together. And so I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but let's talk just briefly about the kind of experiences that people have had in the community. So I'll just start with you and I. Um, that month, it's March of 2023. We did a whole month on guidance. And so you and I were just laser focused on asking for guidance in a way that we're not normally. We're always asking for guidance, but that month we were on it. And we had so many remarkable experiences of feeling like there really was a higher hand at work in the decisions that were being made. And yet we've kind of fallen off the wagon in the sense of not asking with that kind of intensity
Intensity.
and focus. And so again, more evidence that it works if you work it. I know that's kind of a trite phrase, but it's true. All of the experiences in the month that we had this past year on miracles, where we spent a whole month together talking about what it means to go out in the world and be miracle workers, express love to others as a way of demonstrating the walking of this path. Unbelievable stories of transformation and love and healing came out of that focus on just going out in the world and expressing love. And so, do
That
you want to?
focus also with the detail of the instruction the course gives and how to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we saw again and again was that when people asked for guidance, when presented with an opportunity to give a miracle, when they were faced with somebody in need, that guidance so often transformed the encounter. So it was really great to see that the course's instruction on how to give miracles ended up being so practical. And as you know, we collected nearly 100 stories that people had shared, many of them incredibly inspiring and sweet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what's been happening over the last few years, especially, is trying to teach this stuff over many, many years has meant that we get a little better over time and how to do it. And we've just had wonderful times with some of these things. I mean, we had really nice month this year on meditation in the course. The 3 habits that we did a couple 3 years back, those were unforgettable months.
Unforgettable months, really, truly unforgettable months. The course itself says, if you do it, you will see that it works. Right there,
There it
chapter
is.
9. If
Yeah.
you do it, you will see that it works. So, all right, Robert, I know we're getting to the top of the hour here. So, kind of walk us through very briefly in just a couple of minutes the year that we have planned next year in a year of
Okay.
living the course.
Well, it's going to be a bit of a, you know, rapid fire of
Lightning.
information here. Yeah. And we do have this posted on the website. But the idea is that we're going to start the year by popular request going through the 50 miracle principles. And the idea is those lay a foundation really of the kind of person and the kind of life that he wants his students, the kind of person he wants them to be, the kind of life he wants them to live. So, in some ways, this is going to be setting out a goal for us. Then in February, we're talking about starting the day right, what you do upon awakening, and how to read the course. We did a workshop a couple of years ago, I guess a year and a half ago, where people were saying, I do read every day. Well, actually, I listen while I make my coffee. And we're going to talk about how the course wants us to read it, which is really about giving it our whole mind while we do it.
That was a pretty unforgettable moment, by the way. I
Yeah, that
remember
was,
that workshop,
yeah.
and we were like, the whole room full, like 100 people. We're like, who read their lesson today? Who read the course today? And everybody raises their hand, and then we're drilling down. It's like, did you really read? Did you focus? Did you spend some time intently, with the book itself? And it was like, well, no, actually, I just listened to the audio while I got dressed to come here. It's like, well, you didn't actually read the course.
Yeah. So then in March, we're going to talk about our morning quiet time, which is about beginning the day on a foundation of peace. That'll be about meditation, but not solely meditation, also about building the habit. In April, we're talking about hourly remembrance, which is the practice on the top of the hour that treats each hour as a miniature day. And there's some really rich teaching, but the teaching is about how to do that hourly remembrance. That if you do nothing but the hourly remembrance, you'll have a different day. May, we're talking about the practice, the frequent practice throughout the day. So that has to do with what we call frequent reminders, repeating the idea throughout the day in response to temptation, using the idea to dispel upsets. In June, we're talking about asking for guidance and giving miracles. I think we would probably separate those out and make each a month on itself, but we just had a month on each one of those in Course Companions this year that's ending right now. So we're combining those, asking for guidance and giving miracles, living as a miracle worker. In July, we're talking about ending the day right. And this is going to be twofold: recovering the day when it goes off track. What people don't realize is that the main focus in that well known section, Rules for Decision, towards the end of the text, the main focus of that is what to do when your initial intention for the day goes off track. How do you recover it? Then we're talking about closing the day, your evening practice, and also having an additional moment right at bedtime that you spend with God if you've done your evening practice earlier in the evening. August, we're going to bring it all together, review the components, and assemble everything into one whole picture, because it is one whole picture. It is a system. All those parts are related to each other. They are parts of a single system. That's a system for how to have a different kind of day. September, we're going to talk about our guides along the way, which means God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus, forming a relationship with them. In October, we're talking about purpose, finding our special function in God's plan. The Course has a much bigger focus on our function that's the same for everyone, and our special function that's different for each person than we would ever guess, because it's another topic that we kind of ignore. In November, we're talking about holy encounters and holy relationships. This is, holy encounters and holy relationships are the fruit of having a day like we're talking about. We had just a really wonderful workshop a couple years ago on holy encounters. And then we're going to close the year in December with talking about the birth of Christ in us as a way to kind of honor the Christmas season, but also as a way to consciously close the year that we've been on. And then we'll have an actual closing event on December 30th.
I'm excited.
I'm thinking this is going to be a life-changing year for you and me, and for anybody who really comes along on this journey with us. Unfortunately, I think that in my experience, this is not the most inspiring thing to say, but in my experience, when people say, give me the practical, I think what they're generally saying is, give me an experience, not tell me what I need to do in my own life to have the experience. And the fact is, the Course is all about telling you what you can do in your own life to have the experience, to have a different mind, to have a different life.
The thing is, though, is the the discipline is the experience. Um, it's not like, oh, well, there's the practical over here, and then there's the experience over here. when you get the practical right, you have a different experience. And the course even says you achieve so little because you have undisciplined thoughts. And I'm just, as you're going through the year here, I'm really struck by a lot. But one thing that caught my attention was July, ending recovering the day. Um, right there, so often what happens when we get triggered is we say, well, forget it, I'll start again tomorrow. And it's kind of equivalent to all the many diets that we've probably started at the beginning of the new year that we've abandoned, where we get very focused on, I'm going to eat well today, and then we cheat a little bit, and then we forget it, and then you start again the next day, but you never really start again because your discipline wanes and wanes, and then you don't achieve anything. That idea right there, that one thing can change your whole year. If you say, okay, I've been triggered, I've fallen off my path, and I'm just going to get back on right now, not tomorrow, not Monday, not a year from now, right now, I'm going to recover the day. But you have to know how to do that. Like, you have to know what the course tells you about how to do that. And it helps to also have a guide and a community who's all focused on the same thing with you. And so it's like, yeah, I fell off yesterday, or I did really well yesterday. So we can commiserate and inspire each other to be better every single day. And that's the beauty of going through as a group.
It is.
Is there
It
anything
is.
you want
It's
to?
going to be really, really powerful to go through this together. We've had some great experiences in focusing on the same thing together. No, go
Unbelievable
ahead. Close us out.
experiences. Okay. Well, I really at the end of the day, I'm always so moved by the idea in the course of giving the year to God. There's that part in the workbook where it says this 1 year we gave to God. And what would it really mean to take a year and say, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to really try to do what this path asks me to do. And if this is your spiritual path, why wouldn't you want to do what it asks you to do? So make this the year that you give to God. Make this the year that you really go for it and experience the benefits that the course offers, which are many. It does work. And so look, I know that we're over time now, and I know I'm hyper aware that we've talked so much in this podcast about course companions and coming into course companions, but number one, we never do that, by the way. I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast knows that you almost have to pry out a sales message from us. My board's on me about that all the time. Like, hey, Emily, tell them that we actually have a program. You and I are just so interested in the topic at hand in these podcasts that we don't really say much about all that we offer here at the Circle. We're doing that now, unapologetically, because we are embarking on something amazing for next year, and and we're proud of it, and we want you to be part of it. And so we really do have a remarkable course companions community, and it keeps getting better and better every single year. We have a community of students who are kind, who are serious, who are loving, who are generous, and who are mature on this path. And so if you are looking for a spiritual home where you can learn the course, then we hope that you will join us next year for Course Companions as we do this year of living the course. You can learn more and sign up at coursecompanions.com. It's $25 a month, but we have a free trial. You can check it out and cancel anytime right from your profile, no questions asked. And if you want to join but are facing financial hardship, we do have scholarships. No one's turned away from our programming here at the Circle for an inability to pay. So again, visit coursecompanions.com and learn more about what we do here and what we're offering for next year. It's going to be a remarkable year. I promise you, if you stick with the program, if you stick with the course, you will be a different person by the end of the year than you were when you started. I guarantee you. And so come on this journey with us, and we hope to see you in the community next year and beyond. On behalf of Robert and I, and all of us here at the Circle of Atonement, thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.